Hey guys, I didn't know if I'd have to do this again. I didn't want to do it again, but the last video that I filmed about this got corrupted, and fucking iTunes is popping up every 20 seconds for no apparent reason all the time. But today's theme, it's June 8th, 2017. This is the 50th anniversary of the third day of the Six-Day War. So, wrap your head around that. I've been trying to film the video, as I've said a couple times already, and it's all been to no avail. So, if you've watched any of my videos before, or, well, most of my videos aren't about this topic. As you know, I don't focus too much on the Middle East or specifically Israel and the Palestinians and the Arabs. However, I do have a pretty big connection, which I've revealed before, that I served in the army there. Both of my parents are Israeli, or my mom was. She passed away a few years ago. But I've always had sort of an ambivalent relationship in terms of identity. I still think, and I don't know if this will ever change. My culture is American, and the context I see things through is American. I tried living over there, and I don't think it was a good fit. So, what does that mean? The '67 war. My parents were too young to participate in it, but their brothers, and I think my dad had two brothers that served in it. My mom had one brother that served in it. And it was a very seminal event in the history of the Middle East. For those of you that don't know, the Six-Day War was one of the watershed moments in military history. It was one of the last international wars that was decided in such a decisive manner. It was mostly mobile tank units and other revolutionary aspects of military strategy that overwhelmed the stronger numerically Arab forces. And I say Arab intentionally. There's more of an Arab identity during the Six-Day War than a Muslim identity, because the leader was Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, who at one point was, let me put this on mute. At one point he had been trying to reunite the entire Arab world, or unite it for the first time. Reunite isn't even the word. There had never been a united Arab state in history. It had always been a matter of spreading Islam from the beginning of the Arab conquests of other states, and by extension, by Islam of other states. He was the first person to create a cohesive Arab identity. And one of the main obstacles for him to unite the Arab world was this country on his eastern frontier, which was Israel, established a few years before he took power. And the Six-Day War, I'll show you a video in a couple minutes basically documenting how the war started. I don't think I'm going to show the whole thing. I'll just post it in the links. This is it's really grinding my gears how this has gone on, that I keep having to, readjust this, but I think you're going to enjoy this. And then I'm going to tackle one of the more touchy subjects of the war that a lot of people in certain sectors are not really happy about, the lack of coverage for it. But I'll give some explanations. So anyways, tune in and enjoy, and like and subscribe, and let me know what you think.
Shortly after the creation of Israel in 1948, the Arab-Israeli War erupted and resulted in the Egyptian occupation of Gaza and the Jordanian occupation of the West Bank. But the violence continued. Palestinian Fedayeen carried out guerrilla attacks and the Israelis launched a series of reprisal operations. Meanwhile, thanks to Egypt purchasing arms from communist Czechoslovakia, the Soviets began supporting and supplying the Arab nations, while the Americans, and particularly France, began supporting and supplying Israel. Tensions between Egypt and Israel flared up when President Nasser of Egypt closed off Israeli shipping through the Straits of Tiran, starting the Suez Crisis. Israel joined Britain and France in attacking Egypt and successfully occupied the Sinai Peninsula. However, after the conflict, they were forced to hand over the occupation to the United Nations. The conflict gave the Israelis confidence in knowing that they can successfully conduct a full-scale war, while Nasser emerged as the figurehead of Arab nationalism. Tensions flared up again in 1960, shortly after Syria and Egypt united to form the short-lived United Arab Republic. Israel launched a reprisal operation on the Syrians, prompting the Egyptians to mobilize their forces, and although the Rotem crisis finished peacefully, the Israelis' unpreparedness forced them to improve their military intelligence and policies. Then, into the 1960s, there was the formation of the PLO, and in 1963 and again in 1966, coups in Syria put the anti-Israeli Ba'athist Party in power. Small clashes between Syria's new government's forces and the Israelis erupted along the Jordan River in the Sea of Galilee, so they signed a defensive pact with the Egyptians. 1966 also saw Israel launch reprisal operations in Jordan. The Samu incident led to widespread protests within Jordan, putting pressure on King Hussein to respond. However, Hussein blamed Nasser for failing to come to his aid, so Nasser was also put under pressure to respond. Then, in May 1967, Nasser received false reports from the Soviets that the Israelis were moving troops to the Syrian border. Nasser responded quickly by expelling...
So that's an important point that is kind of overlooked, that Nasser was also often egged on by the Soviet Union. So those of you people that believe that the Jews are the communist masterminds, remember that Egypt was a Soviet client state during the Six-Day War and a few years past the Six-Day War, in fact. So where's your case? What are you going to say, that the Jews tricked the Soviets into tricking Egypt into a war?
UN peacekeepers from Sinai and moved his own troops in on May 19th. Then, on May 22nd, he once again blockaded the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, even though doing so would be considered an act of war by the Americans. However, US President Johnson bided for time, not wanting to get involved in the conflict, and warned the Israelis to wait. Meanwhile, Nasser signed a defensive pact with the Jordanians, and other Arab nations began to move troops to the Israeli borders as well. Now, to remain neutral in this issue, here are two scenarios. Israel needed to launch a preemptive strike against the Egyptians in order to gain the advantage against the larger forces on their border. Or, Israel knew the Egyptians were in no position to attack, but used this opportunity to launch an aggressive war with their own superior army. You be the judge of which is correct. Either way, on June the 5th, 1967, Israel launched airstrikes on the Egyptian Air Force, crippling it while simultaneously moving troops into Sinai. Jordan and Syria responded to the call of arms, and other Arab nations, notably Iraq, sent a great deal of aid and weapons to the war effort. However, Israeli airstrikes also rendered their air force useless, so the Syrians and Jordanians responded by shelling Israel itself. The Israelis pushed into Egypt following their retreating army, and captured Gaza and the entire Sinai Peninsula within just 4 days. Meanwhile, also within 4 days, they had pushed the Jordanians out of Jerusalem and forced them to retreat from the West Bank. The final 2 days were spent driving the Syrians out of the Golan Heights. Now, fearing that the Soviet Union might step in to aid their Arab allies, the United States helped push Israel to sign an armistice, but they continued to occupy the lands they had taken while the peace process was underway. The Arab states met in Khartoum in September and declared they would never recognize the State of Israel. However, as part of UN Security Council Resolution 242, an incredibly ambiguous resolution, they agreed to make concessions in exchange for Israel returning the land they had taken. However, it would take another war and peace resolution before the Sinai was given back to Egypt. Meanwhile, the Golan Heights, West Bank and Gaza Strip remain under Israeli occupation, so the Arab nations refuse to recognize Israel, and the conflict continues.
So in that short segment, you do get a little of the flavor of what went on, what went into causing that conflict. I did end up filming the entire video again, and they did a pretty good job. A couple inaccuracies: that the Gaza Strip is now no longer a Israeli possession. It's been rendered back to the Hamas government, in Gaza. That's a conversation for a different day. However, let me emphasize this. The idea that this war, which Bernie Sanders said, we have to come to a conclusion now, 50 years after the war. Bernie, here's a message for you. It's been 56 years since the Chinese occupation of Tibet, and you haven't said shit about it. It's been about, what would it be now, 102 years since the Armenian genocide of, I think it was in 1915, correct me if I'm wrong. When are you asking for the Turks to give back that part of Armenia that, they went in and basically butchered all the people there? It's been, think about how many wars have been over the past, 100 years where these lefty losers, besides the 6-Day War, which other one are people, sorry, this is bothering me. I haven't been working on camera for a while. Jeez, man. You got this issue where suddenly with one particular war, coincidentally a war that took 6 days and has a relatively low casualty figure, these both left-wing and right-wing opponents of Israel want to roll back the hands of time. They want to flip the hourglass as if they're going to turn back the sands of time. I don't think it's ever worked that way in any other case for any other war in history. Remember, we had our Vietnam War. Is Mr. Bernie Sanders trying to get South Vietnam independent again? Or, turn back the sands of the Cambodian Civil War? No. And I think we both know why that is. It's because he's perfectly fine and has never had an issue with what happened in either of those wars to the losers who were basically slaughtered like cattle in one of the worst atrocities in history that, people basically in America, they're like, oh, that was kind of a failed experiment. No. The 6-Day War, when compared to almost every other conflict of the same period, was a mild aberration. Let me give you some figures here, and but before I do that, you might want to pay attention to the, some of you might be, losing your attention span. So for all the white nationalist, and other critics of what I'm saying, here's a little interlude. We now pause for a brief intermission so that white nationalists and other people who don't believe a word I'm saying can have a brief moment to return to the fake reality that they live in.
The white man marches on! See this? That means not welcome.
And his brother's hero.
I trust you, Dad.
Welcome to Holly Scoop. I'm Stephanie Bauer. Haven't heard from Tila Tequila in a while? Well, boy, is she ever back. She is claiming Paul Walker was murdered, she's praising Hitler, and posing in a Nazi uniform at the gates of Auschwitz concentration camp. Tila...
Barack Obama, I'm certain of a number of things. One thing I'm absolutely sure of, and I so hope I'm right, I believe that Barack Obama's heart is in the right place. This isn't George Bush 2. This guy thinks about things, he cares about people.
Okay, so after that little cheery interlude for some of you, I'd like to turn your attention to several wars that happened at the time of the Six-Day War, okay, and some of the casualties. This is the North Yemen Civil War, 1962 to 1970. The allegations are that there were 100,000 to 200,000 people who died during that war. What was that war in the name of? It was a war between the supporters of Arab nationalism, supported by Egypt, the same Egypt led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, and traditionalists over there, the supporters of the monarchy in Yemen. Why is that important? At the time of the Six-Day War, Egypt was already involved in a foreign war against a native population. So does anybody care about that? Does anybody in terms of Roger Waters or any of these other great agents of social change, do they ever protest that we should give Yemen back to the monarchy, back to whoever the hell was in control of Yemen before 1962? I've never heard a single person say that. In fact, if you look, let me highlight this. It says that since 1920, so that would be 97 years, there have been only about 116,000 people who have died in the Arab-Israeli conflict entirely, not just the Six-Day War. Okay, so why are they trying to shoehorn a solution into a conflict that, in the grand scheme of things, is not nearly as crucial as other wars that have happened that have been completely ignored? It's a simple question. For those of you that don't trust Wikipedia, you can look at Muftah, which is an NGO that's dealing with the Yemeni insurgency, and they talk about, they say it's as many as 100,000 battle deaths in the Yemeni Civil War. Not this one, not the one happening right now, the one that was happening in the 60s. So if you don't trust me, look up, it's muftah.org. They're certainly not a friend of the Israelis, so far as I know. How about this one? This was the Biafran Civil War, or the Biafran War, the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970. There are total estimates of 45 to 100,000 people killed in this war. Okay, and the Six-Day War, again, was nothing compared to it. Okay, if you want to check out sourcing, let's go ahead and do that. Here's an estimate from Tufts University, and it says that there are estimates between 500,000 up to 6 million people dying in the Biafra War. So I've never heard a single person in the West ever mention Biafra, a solidarity movement to Biafra, a Biafra aid convoy, or whatever you want to call it. What was it? The blockade runners. The Freedom Flotilla. There's never been a Freedom Flotilla on behalf of Biafra anywhere in the West. You don't see Linda Sarsour getting calls to host any events to liberate Biafra. So where's the double standard here? So what about the death figures from the Six-Day War? So the Six-Day War, here's the top. We'll go into a couple casualty figures. I'm not gonna do an exposition on everything here, but in this war there was a total of 10,000 to 15,000 killed on the Egyptian side, 4,338 captured, 6,000 killed or missing on the Jordanian side, 533 captured. The Syrians, 2,500 killed, 591 captured. The Iraq, 10 killed. Lebanon lost 1 plane. That's about 23,500 people dead from the Arab side. Is that really the tragedy of history? Now, a lot of people will come and say, look, you're not looking at the real cost of it, which has been the conflict since then. I actually have, because I already told you that the figure for the entire conflict, and that's even from before the beginning of the State of Israel in 1948, from 1920 is 116,000 people. And nobody ever complains about the number of people lost on the other side, which is that Israel numerically by population is much smaller. So the double standard is very clear, and you do not have to be a Zionist or somebody who has any sympathy, one of these Christian fundamentalists or something, to realize that this is simply, with all logical facts on the table, this is the most convoluted issue in the world right now. There's so many countries right now that you could look at where there needs to be more attention. I would probably put my focus on China and North Korea. There's all the problems that are happening right now in the Philippines. There's the issues that are happening in Venezuela. But no, they chose to select the Six-Day War, a conflict that happened 50 years ago, rather than issues that have been breaking out nowadays that are much more flagrant and violent. They choose that as the real problem that we have to solve in order to make the world better. You know what? I call that deflection. I call that the establishment using, just a convenient scapegoat. And convenient as always, this particular scapegoat, in order to deflect from their just utter failure to address their own needs or address the needs of their constituents. And that goes for the Arab world, that goes for the world at large, including the Western countries. In Europe, there's a healthy anti-Israel and I would say also anti-Jew movement that is it sort of spans all over the spectrum. Okay, you have people from all over the spectrum and of all ethnicities that simply find time to dwell on a conflict that happened somewhere they've never been and that they don't know anything about. And that's ultimately what I would suggest. If you really have a problem with it, you're actually free to go there usually, unless you've done something particularly just egregious that they would know that you would come there to make a problem. I mean, they do have certain activists that come there and they make a point of breaking the laws and provoking provoking their own arrests usually, doing things like diving in front of bulldozers and claiming that it's an act of love. No, that's an act of idiocy. The Rachel Corrie incident, and her family might as well. They got real. The whole world, they have given these people a pass. If they would really look at who's to blame, it would probably be themselves for letting their daughter get brainwashed into sacrificing herself for a country that could give a shit about her and could give a shit about her society and could give a shit about her values and about all of the things that she learned in college. All these martyrs that say, these people saying, oh, the Six-Day War is the biggest injustice of history. There's injustices of history far greater that are happening right now. Okay, there's injustices of history that are being perpetrated in Turkey and in Venezuela and in Cuba that none of these people could care about because it doesn't affect them. There were starvations and forced famines in Ethiopia and Ukraine, and we all know in what name that was done. It was in the name of equality and proletarian freedom. So why is that? Why don't we need to reverse that? Why don't we need to go, oh, I think I know the reason. The reason is that the system that created those disgusting atrocities has fallen by the wayside. Okay, guys, so I hope you enjoyed my take on the Six-Day War. There's a part 1.5, I guess you would call it. It's not exactly only the Six-Day War that I'm going to be releasing later. Let me know what you think. If you have a different take on the war, go ahead and put it in the comments or record a video response. My take is that historical events are meant to remain in history, and it's fine to remember them and teach your own opinions about them, but this nonsense, and I'm pointing at any of you that are believing in this point, that you're going to reverse the course of a war. And you know, I got the Jewish conspiracy hands here. That you can go and turn back the hands of time and just pretend that it never happened by negotiating away, you know, land or trying to appease somebody else. That's ridiculous. Name me any other place where that's worked. We've had in the same time period as Israel, roughly, I'd say, you know, 20 plus years, or you know, let's say 25 years before and after. You had the island of Ireland partitioned, and it's nowhere close to being united yet. You had India partitioned. You had the country itself was the creation of a partition of the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Okay, all those countries are the results of partitions, and nobody's talking about. The only people that are talking about reversing the results of World War I are ISIS, and you could look all across the world. How many countries have lost territory or gained territory? And you know, we're looking at America. There's a few activists who want the United States to give back to Mexico the entire western half of the country, basically Cali and Texas and whatever. You lost the war, Mexico. You know, you lose a war, you lose something, and you ain't getting it back. And that's the way I think we should approach every war. That this isn't a matter of negotiating back in order to make things equitable. And the Six-Day War is no different. And really the answer to all of these problems is that we should give these countries total sovereignty and let the UN die as it deserves to die, as it deserves to, due to its failures throughout its entire history since 1945, I think it was created. National sovereignty means that each nation should be able to negotiate on its own terms without bullying from outside with its neighbors, and to resolve disputes that way. Not this farce that we've been having over the past 50 years since the Six-Day War, and you know, legitimately even before that. So have a good night. Like I said, leave your comments below or send a response, and have a great night, and I guess happy anniversary to some of you.